Saturday, August 27th.
Well, I think what gets lost a lot is the fact that Dr. King was first and foremost a Baptist preacher. He was a pastor. And in fact, all of his efforts were spiritually based. And as such, then, I felt the need, on the one, because of who he was at his core, that is a spiritual man, that there needed to be a spiritual dedication, blessing, and consecration of the monument grounds prior to the official unveiling. So that is the first vision that we had in terms of this whole thing. Of course, the march itself precedes it, where we will march for jobs and justice, but all of what we do must be undergirded by a spiritual base. And because Dr. King himself did everything that he did based upon his belief in God and the power of God, then that is why we felt it very needful and necessary to do a consecration and blessing service for the monument before it is officially opened and before the many millions from across the world come there, and as well to invigorate the clergy, which have historically, and particularly the black church, been the moral conscience of this nation, and to reestablish it as the vanguard for the struggle for justice and liberation and freedom for the masses of oppressed people in this nation, both black and white and all over this world. And so those two factors are primary to this whole effort, so that it is, on one sense, a march in the legitimate sense that Dr. King did so many hundreds of marches during his lifetime, to at a time when what I call the paradox of progress, where we have a black president and yet our community is at the bottom of the list in every negative that you can name, and continue to get worse. I just had some statistics just last week, for example, that the median income for whites is now 25 times more than African American community. When you consider the number of home foreclosures, when you consider the number of people who are out of work, it's a time we certainly need to reawaken and reinvigorate the same kind of efforts that Dr. King put forth, because in fact, in many instances, our people have been put on the back burner, and no one is speaking for the concerns and needs of our community, and it must be done. And so hopefully and prayerfully, this will be the impetus for a revival, if you will, of the spirit of Dr. King, in terms of willingness of the masses of our people to stand up and be counted and fight for justice and fairness and equality in this nation.
I know one of the goals of this consecration service is to create a think tank amongst the clergy and the black community and the black church. What things do you think that we can do once the march is over, the consecration is over, the event is over, and everybody goes back to their respective places? What things that can we do to keep the spirit that will be raised in this revival going after the event is over?
Well, one of the things that I hope to do, and because we have pretty much all of the major denominations represented, we will have the bishop from the AME Zion, and the CME churches. We will have the bishop of the Holiness Churches of America. We will have the president of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. We will have the president of the Baptist Ministers Conference. We will have all of these individuals, so that we will hopefully meet while we're here and begin to strategize, because we all know the kind of economic power that exists in the black church. We can forage an effort to create some business and some jobs and begin to mobilize and organize, so that that's what's critical. I think if we talk about the life of Dr. King, that's what he did across the length and breadth of this nation. He met with clergy from various denominations, and they worked together. We need to take it to a new level at this point in our history, and prayerfully that's what will come out of this, where we can begin to strategize politically, economically, socially, and in every kind of way imaginable, to make life better for the masses of oppressed people in this nation.
You're listening to the voice of Reverend Willie Wilson on WOL 1450 AM, where information is power. Pastor, I'd like to ask you this. Give us a rundown of what's going to happen on the 27th, starting in the morning.
In the morning, we will start with a march. The march will go from the Lincoln Memorial to the Martin Luther King Memorial. Prayerfully, I don't know how many people will come. I know that we have buses coming from across the country. Depending on the crowd, I guess will determine how long it will take to make that 1.1 mile trek. There will be 2 stages. One at the Lincoln Memorial. On that stage will be governmental officials and leaders of organizations, etc., who will make comments in the same spirit that Dr. King brought labor and youth and workers and all the various segments of the community together. Those various groups will be represented on that first stage at the Lincoln Memorial. Then we will march from the Lincoln Memorial to the King Memorial, which is where we will have the service of blessing and consecration. As I mentioned earlier, many of the leaders of various religious denominations will participate in that service, interspersed with entertainment. We have Sweet Honey in the Rock, which I'm sure many listeners know about for their traditional spirituals and tremendous harmony. Sounds like the polyphonic harmony of our South African brothers and sisters is so beautiful. And of course, Jermaine Hawkins and other groups, Aries, quite a few other groups, and interspersed with prayers and offerings of consecration of the grounds by the various religious leaders who will be represented there.
We know that you are no stranger to this type of work and the role that you played with orchestrating the Million Man March. That was another historic event that took place here in our nation's capital. Why do you think events of this magnitude are important for people to experience, especially people who are of a younger generation who might not understand the struggle from a perspective of marching and rallying and gathering all of us up together to work together?
Well, I think the greatest thing is the power of the Spirit. You know, when we did the Million Man March, for example, we had no idea with all of the problems, and I believe there's a whole book that could be written about all the adverse situations and circumstances that we had to overcome. But in spite of ourselves, it was what theologians call one of those kairotic points in history, where God moves and you know it was God, because there's no way could you have done. I can remember sitting in a hotel room at 4 a.m. in the morning and someone knocked on my door and said there are already 300,000 black men out on the mall. That was in spite of all the blocks and roadblocks that were put in our way to try to keep it from happening. And so what I look for and what I'm believing that will happen is that same kind of spiritual contagion. And might I add, almost 2 million black men and not one negative incident. I believe that, again, that was the move of Almighty God. And I'm looking for the same thing. We're asking all the churches in the area to come as a congregation and bring their banners. We're talking about a revival here. We're talking about something that our young people, most have never seen. And that'll light a fire. You know, as it has in the past, it'll do it again. You know, there's one of the prophets in the Old Testament that says, hitherto, in the past, hath the Lord blessed us, and he will bless us in the future. And so it is in that same sense that we're coming together through the work of Reverend Sharpton and others who are working very hard to organize this effort. We're talking about a revival of a way of moving as a collective, as a group of people, to make a difference. And for the young people to see that and to see it in action and to know what it is. Because in a very real sense, the same struggles that we had then, we have now. We have not overcome. We have not arrived, notwithstanding the few that have their little house and picket fence and the dog in the backyard and the swimming pool. The majority of our people are still living at or below the level of poverty. And someone has to speak. Dr. King spoke for those who could not speak for themselves. It is those who wear the same cloth today, challenge and opportunity and commitment to stand and speak as he did.
All right, that's it.